This interview is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's Oral History Program, Living Legends Collection. There is no original date given for this interview. The interview is conducted by Mr. Frank Doyle. The interviewee is Mr. R. G. Miller of Oklahoma City. This interview is being re-recorded on April the 11th, 1985 for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener.
Well, I think it works. At least I hope it does. Works so far. Or we could truly say at the moment that we're in the smoking room.
Yes, sir.
In the smoking room. And that should be synonymous with saying RGM, R.G. Miller. Mr. Miller, and seriously, I've enjoyed your column since I've been in town. It's been over 5.5, close to 6 years now.
Thank you.
During the course of that time, writing the column and getting around the state primarily, I guess, I suspect that there are a lot of things that have interest you even beyond what you've written about. But before we get into that, since this is a contribution to the Living Legend Library at Oklahoma Christian College, let's reach back and find out from where you emanated.
I headed up in southeastern Arkansas, on the banks of the White River near its mouth, about 40 miles from the Mississippi River.
And when did you come into Oklahoma City?
April 25th, 1920.
Well, that's a good piece back in there. You've seen a lot happen.
I came here by way of Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana.
You know, but the way you write and the description that you use, I think you've always liked to travel.
I've been in every state on the continent except South Carolina, and I don't know how I missed it.
I was going to say, how did you miss it? Well, why did you come here, sir?
I was offered a little better job than I had in New Orleans. Newspaper work.
You worked on a paper there.
Oh, yeah.
So New Orleans Picayune?
Times-Picayune.
Times-Picayune, yes. Famous old paper. And you came here to go to work for what? The Oklahoma?
The Oklahoma Publishing Company. Oklahoman and Times.
What did you do when you first came?
I was a copy reader for 3 years. I was city editor of the Oklahoman from 23 to 28. I was Sunday editor from 28 to 38. I became an editorial writer in 38. But I had started the smoking room column in 1935 as a Sunday feature. When they moved me into the Times editorial writing job, I found a little time on my hands, and I began using the smoking room in the Times every day, in addition to Sunday. You see, in that time from 1920 to 1938, I had traveled some 200,000 miles within the state, visiting every county a number of times, getting acquainted with Oklahoma. I was doing this on business assignments and on vacations, on weekend trips, taking my wife and 3 little boys and 1 dog with me nearly everywhere. And at the end of that period, I had several notebooks full of names, dates, events, places, hobbies, out of which I started the smoking room.
I suspect it's been really rewarding for you, hasn't it?
Well, I've enjoyed every minute of it. I wouldn't swap jobs with anybody.
It sounds like it, and it reads that way.
Well, I've tried to make it simple and easy to read. And I have no idea how many readers we have, but the column ranks well in readership, among other features.
Well, you sure put the names in there. Of course, that's an important ingredient. Even though you did travel a state and so forth, I suspect that during the course of your earlier times, you still covered a great deal of activity here in the city, didn't you?
Not much. I never was a reporter within the city.
Oh, you never covered general assignments? Huh?
No. I covered the state, looking for features, taking my own pictures. When I came here in 1920, and the only places to play that people in Oklahoma City knew about, in addition to those within our own city limits, were Medicine Park down at the edge of the Wichita Mountains, the Platte National Park at Sulphur, and some lakes over east of Tulsa, which are still their water supply, the Spavinaw Lake region. They were the principal places. There were no state parks, no lodges, not a paved road in the state.
Well, that was sort of a rustic.
So I have
traveling.
seen the highway system build from the ground up. Highway paving began in about 1924, while M.E. Trapp was governor. He appointed the first three-man highway commission, and federal highways began to be marked at that time, and Oklahoma received its share of them and still has them. A good number have been added since. I believe we have about 25 federal highways in the state now, besides the two interstates.
What were some of the earlier paved highways?
Clear across the state, there were 66 was perhaps the main one, but not the first. Highway US 77 was the first. It was paved all the way across the state, north and south. And then came 270 and 70 and 69 and 81. Highway 81 that runs north and south through Enid and El Reno and Chickasha and Duncan was largely paid for before federal aid ever became available by the people of each county through bonds.
The state built it, and they helped pay for it.
Yeah. So in my rounds, as I'd go from place to place, I was hunting for new scenery. I've tried during the years to introduce the Oklahoma City people to the Wichita Mountains, the Kiamichi Mountains, the Potato Hills, the Cookson Hills, the Osage Hills, the Antelope Hills, the Glass Mountains, the Sandboy Mountains. And in those travels we found a lot of pretty streams, some of which were good fishing. Always carried my fishing tackle with me. I didn't mind being stranded on the bank of a creek anytime I was out on the go.
Well, obviously the family enjoyed it too, didn't it?
Yes. Since our three sons became grown, got married, and established their own families, why, Mrs. Miller has traveled with me. The last 15, 18 years, telling me when and where to turn and stop.
She's sort of the co-pilot, huh?
She's a navigator.
Navigator.
When we came to Oklahoma City in 1920, the Crestwood edition, in which our home has been located since 1939, was open prairie. There was almost nothing west of Villa or north of 23rd. Principal country club was Lakeside, out on the banks of Lake Overholser. In 1928, when the Board of Education began building a new high school, a new junior high school rather, out at 23rd and North May, there was a great roar of protest went up from people about it, complaining that that location was much too far out in the country to be considered. But it was built, and it has become it's been enlarged 2 or 3 times since. Streetcars were operating, interurban lines to Guthrie, El Reno, and Norman were operated on an hourly schedule. The old 17th Street station at 17th Street and Classen deserves a place in the city's history, because nearly everybody who lived out in that direction warmed his feet or hands at the old pot-bellied stove that was in that station.
17th and Classen, huh?
There were no supermarkets. Every grocery store, every drugstore delivered anything you'd ordered free. It wasn't unusual for a person to order some postage stamps sent over, sent out.
Mm.
In 1941, I hit upon the idea of conducting some tours to take city people and people who live in central and western Oklahoma to the eastern hills and mountains and forest country to see dogwood blossoms in the spring and autumn foliage about the first week in November. We've continued that almost annually except during the war years, and they're very popular. Those tours grew from 100 automobile private cars in the first tour in 1941 to 1962 when we had 32 busloads of people that went on one foliage tour. We now average about 30 busloads every time we organize a tour. And incidentally, we have another dogwood blossom tour coming up for April 25th, 1965. Going into the Cherokee and Cookson Hills in the region of the town of Tahlequah.
How long are those tours?
One day.
Just one day?
About 15 or 16 years ago, I was made a member of the board of directors of the Oklahoma Historical Society. There's 25 or 30 members of that board living in various parts of the state. Upon inquiry, I found that nearly all of these members, they had been reading and talking about the beautiful and the wonderful historic spots we have in the state made during the course of Oklahoma history, but hadn't been there. I got on my feet at the board meeting the second year I was on the board and suggested that we continue our reading and talking about these things, but I suggested that we go and see some of them and take a crowd of people with us that wanted to go. So we've had from 110 to 175 people on chartered buses going on historical tours annually ever since. We can't take more because there are not very many towns outside of 3 or 4 in the state that can take care of 150 transients, just
That's right.
drop-ins, feed and sleep them under one roof.
You've unearthed a lot of, not only a lot of beauty, but a lot of history around the state.
Of course, I've tried to study the history of the state and I think I have acquired a working knowledge of it. I'm no authority on history. I could write a column about 100 or more interesting historical events that occurred in the state, maybe a few in the city. But if I want to make sure of my facts, I go to the headquarters, which is the Historical Society office.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that I have helped a lot of Oklahoma people get acquainted with their own state. And I've received a great deal of commendation for my efforts along that line. I think my employers like what I've done, what I'm still trying to do. See, I will have been with these papers 45 years in April.
I would say that's a rather permanent job.
Probably put me on steady.
Yeah, if you watch it.
Yeah. One of the early things I learned, or I was told after I began driving around the state, was that the highest mountain in the state was Mount Scott, down in the Wichita range near Lawton. It didn't take me long to find that there are 3 other mountains on the east side of the state that are considerably higher than Mount Scott. School teachers didn't like it. They disputed it. They'd been teaching their children all their lives that Mount Scott was the highest mountain. To a lot of people, Mount Scott is the only mountain anyone ever heard of in this part of the country.
What are the others?
Rich Mountain's the highest mountain, 2,950 feet. The second is Sugarloaf Mountain. And one part of the Kiamichi Mountain is a little higher than Mount Scott, which is 2,455. I think the prettiest river in the state is the Mountain Fork, which is entirely within McCurtain County in the southeast corner of the state. It's a mountain stream, never dry, always clear, full of game fish, wonderful float trips on it. Another beautiful river is the Illinois River. It runs up through Cherokee County largely, and Sequoia County. The Grand River has many beauty spots along its stream. The Glover River is another mountain stream, and it is wholly within McCurtain County. In fact, there's more good streams and more good fishing in McCurtain County streams than in any other county in the state. In addition to the streams, it has 52 natural lakes. You know, there's always has existed an impression here that Oklahoma is pretty much of a dry state as far as water is concerned. Well, with the help of the county agents in this state, county farm agents, and others, we now know that we have about 2,200 square miles of lake water in Oklahoma. That doesn't put us at top. Minnesota has more lake water than any other state, and I believe Wisconsin is second. I don't know which state is third, but we have more than Texas has. Possibly more than Florida has. Certainly more than Montana, Colorado, New Mexico. So we have a wonderful state here. The lowest point in altitude, the point of elevation from sea level, is about 300 feet in the extreme southeastern corner of the state. The highest point is the peak of the Black Mesa in northwestern corner of Cimarron County, which is 4,977 feet.
They say that Black Mesa is an extremely attractive but sort of an awesome type of scenery. I've never seen it. I've seen it from the air, but I haven't seen it on the ground.
It's not a particularly high mountain. It's just high country out there. The Black Mesa itself perhaps is not more than 1,500 feet high from ground level to its peak. The Colorado line runs right across the top of it in one place. But out in that same country we have a great amount of petrified wood that we've never developed to the point of showing it off. I don't know that we have any more petrified wood than Arizona has. Probably don't have as much, but we have one log out there. It's a redwood log, by the way. 105 feet of that log are exposed. Geologists say it's 150 million years old. It was on the banks of the inland sea which covered the western part of the western panhandle of our panhandle, much of New Mexico, nearly all of Colorado, most of Wyoming, and some of western Kansas. That log, petrified log, is 8 feet in diameter. It's lying there now at its base, and it's 5 feet in diameter, 105 feet from its base. And it's the same redwood, kind of redwood, that you find in California now, and you don't find anywhere in Oklahoma anymore.
mystery is, how did it get there?
Well, it just grew there. The country changed. The Rocky Mountains weren't there then either.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's going back 150 million years. That was low country then.
We have just about everything in this state, don't we?
Just about. This state now ranks second only to Texas in the amount of beef produced on farms and ranches. It often ranks first in production of pecans of all kinds, the improved varieties and natives. Our pecans are mostly natives. They are the best flavored.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ready market for every pecan that's picked. At least half the time, we rate first in the production of broom corn, out of which the brooms that sweep the nation are made. We do not rank so high in poultry or in dairy. Rank fourth in oil. You have any idea? You want to pump me for anything?
Do you think this area in which you naturally have evidenced a great deal of interest and been apparent to everybody who's ever read about it, do you think that eventually we will put ourselves in the position where tourism will be a big factor in our state?
I think so. It's improving all the time, of course, getting a little heavier each year. We have 16 state parks now that are open to the public, and all of them are well used. Texoma State Park alone attracted 8 million visitors last year. Our one national park is Platte National at Sulphur, is the smallest national park, but ranked third in 1964 in attendance by the public. By actual count, they have counters in all these parks to count the people as they go in. Five of our state parks have nice lodges, as well furnished as any city hotel. Our one national park is Platte National at Sulphur, is the smallest national park, but ranked third in 1964 in attendance by the public. By actual count, they have counters in all these parks to count the people as they go in. 5 of our state parks have nice lodges, as well furnished as any city hotel. 2 more new lodges that open late this spring.
Well, I know that although I have traveled the state some, I certainly haven't covered it as religiously as you, but some of the places I have seen are, I think, some of the most beautiful I've ever laid eyes on in the country.
We have some very beautiful sections of the state. I have been privileged to see the autumn foliage in the Great Smoky Mountains and the Berkshire Hills in Massachusetts, and through the mountain sections of West Virginia, part of the Allegheny Range. I've seen the aspen display of foliage in the Rocky Mountains. But I haven't seen any autumn foliage that's any prettier than we have right here in our own state. See, this state has 140 different kinds of trees. And all of them put out a slightly different hue or blend of color. And when the sun is shining on all of them at the same time, you really get a rainbow view.
You know, I was struck, and I'm using the first person merely as a fact to give you one impression. The redbud tree, to me, is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
It is. Just unfortunate that the blossoms don't last but about 2 weeks, and they fold up. Dogwood does the same, but the flower's still there, but it's covered up by leaves. See, the flower comes first.
And then the leaves.
Then the leaves.
On dogwood.
That's a chance we have to take on organizing these tours every year. You just have to guess at it. But we've hit it right every time but 2.
Have to have some spies out to keep watch on them.
See, it takes a month to organize an event of that magnitude and get the tickets issued, get the people interested in wanting to take a whole day out and go and see the beauty of the countryside. And if you pick the 25th of the month of April to run your tour, and the flowers come out on the 10th, which they have done twice since 1941. Well, your people are disappointed, and I get to blame.
Can't blame nature, they got to blame you. The redbud, that's indigenous to Oklahoma, isn't it?
Yeah, but it isn't. There's a lot of states, even including New York State and New Jersey, that have redbud just about as plentiful as we have it, and it's in all states between here and there.
But doesn't seem to be as prevalent.
No, we have lots of it. When you set out a little dogwood tree, why, this little redbud tree, it's almost certain it's going to become a tree. doesn't kill out easily.
Well, aren't they rapid growers also?
Yes. Yeah, you get flowers in 2 years.
We've also noticed how rapidly the mimosa variety grows through here.
There are 175 different kinds of wild flowers that have been identified in this state.
I've noticed down through the arbuckles the various signs indicating what type of makeup the topography is. That seems rather unusual.
That is done by the Geological Department at the University of Oklahoma. One of those signs identifies that particular formation there as the Wilcox sand, the oil sand. Now it's on top of the ground there. It's 7,200 feet underground here in Oklahoma City.
The same sand, the same type of sand.
So now we're trying to develop navigation on our rivers, some of them. I hope to live long enough to see it because I grew up on a river that had a steamboat came every Thursday. And I was always there.
Where was that, in
As a
Mississippi?
youngster in Arkansas.
Arkansas. Well, I've watched them on the Mississippi, more or less in the contemporary sense, but it's still a thrill to see them.
I made 2 trips when I was a youngster from the place where I was born down the White River into the Arkansas, into the Mississippi, and up to Memphis on a full-size Mississippi River steamboat.
Well, I've gone down the Ohio in what was left. Let's see, it was the old John Green was one of them, and there was a pleasure boat that used to go out of Cincinnati, the Island Queen. Of course, the new boat, comparatively new boat that they have up and down the river on the Mississippi in St. Louis, well, it's more or less a pleasure boat.
Yeah.
It's not the old-time steamer.
All these old boats I grew up with, I knew in my youth, why, they'd be loaded with cotton or mules, and they just had one deck for passengers. Carried passengers and all kinds of cargo.
Passengers then were incidental. When talking, I talked with Mr. Kane the other day, William Morgan Kane,
Yeah,
who is
a good friend of mine.
vitally interested in water and the increase in the use of water in the state and the availability of water. And he was enthused about our eventual port next door to the city, and used the premise that much of the land along the Deep Fork, which is the proposed plan at least, would receive quite a boost in reclaiming even.
I think they plan to establish the port of Oklahoma City around close to Luther, I think.
Yeah. At least that's the latest plan. Unless somebody disturbs it. Yeah. Well, this state's moved along rather rapidly, hasn't it, Mr. Miller?
Surely has. When I came here, Oklahoma City had one high school, Central High School, up here at 7th and Robinson. I don't believe I could name all of them now. Must be at least a dozen.
Quite a few now. How does our highway system look to you?
Well, I defend our highways. As I mentioned earlier, I've been in my automobile. I've covered every state now but South Carolina. I don't find that our roads are any rougher or any narrower than I find in Kansas, or Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois. They're all two-lane roads, most of them, except the interstates. There are a few exceptions where, close to the big cities, there are 4 or 6 lane divided roads leading into the cities, just as we have here. There are very few cities in the country that have developed an expressway system that we're about to finish up here in Oklahoma City right now. Houston is a town of 1 million people, doesn't have anything like any of our expressways. St. Louis has one.
Right. And it's practically inadequate now.
Our roads are all free, except the 3 turnpikes that are in operation. Our bridges are all free. I made a trip north and east last summer. I paid tolls at 31 different places. The Easterners haven't learned that these things come free yet. While driving from New York to Boston, I think you pay tolls about 10 times. Just 4 or 5 hour drive.
Well, I've made that drive, and it gets to be annoying after a while.
They collect tolls on the interstate roads up in that country.
Well, we should stop and count our blessings on occasion, shouldn't we?
Well, that's one great fault that I've noticed. Oklahoma people, they're too many of us are inclined to low rate what we have. A lot of our people go to New Mexico and Minnesota and Colorado to go fishing. Well, I catch more fish right here in Oklahoma lakes and streams than anybody catches in any of those other states.
Why do you think they do that? They don't bother to look around their own state?
They just want to get away from home.
I guess perhaps that's it. The other side of it.
They can afford it, so they go.
Pasture looks greener on the other side of the fence.
I've reached the point where I take a vacation outside of Oklahoma every year because I can afford it now. It was a long time I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been seeing the rest of the country for the last 15, 18 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, our city has grown up around a lot of people, hasn't it?
Sure has. When I get out away from home in another state, about all I'm asked about is Indians.
Mm-hmm.
There came a letter here a couple of years ago addressed to the Department of Tourist Information, Oklahoma City. That was the only, that's the way it was addressed.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, some clerk in the post office, I guess, thought I must be it, so they didn't think about sending it out to the state. Anyway, I got it. It was from a banker in a town out from Baltimore in Maryland. He said that he was driving with his family clear across the country. That coming summer, this letter came in the spring sometime.
Mm-hmm.
And it said that the AAA travel service had, in mapping a route for him, he noticed that he comes through Oklahoma on Highway 66, entering it at one corner of the state and going clear across.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he would appreciate it if we would tell him that it looked like it was so far across the state that he was going to have to stay overnight somewhere in Oklahoma. And he would like our recommendation as a safe place to stay so that he wouldn't be molested by Indians.
It sounds funny, but so true.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh. Well, it looks then like we have a continuing job of selling our state.
One of these days, if I live long enough, if I ever retire, I'm going to try to put together a book on my travels and my experiences in Oklahoma.
I wish you would. I'm sure that a lot of people would enjoy it.
I don't know whether it would be a profitable venture or not, but I still have all the notes that I ever took and all the columns that I ever wrote, all the features that I ever did.
Well, that makes quite a library.
Well, it's in a jumbled fashion. Nobody can do anything with it but me.
Your own filing system. Well, you might get to it someday, but then I doubt if you're going to
If I could
retire.
get at it, I could do it in 90 days.
Mhm.
But here, I'm paid to do a job here, and I put in a full day's work, 6 days a week, and sometimes on Sunday, which I enjoy also.
Mhm.
I'm not a clock watcher.
I suspect you've met a lot of interesting people around the state in your travels, haven't you?
I've made talks in, I expect, 100 different towns in Oklahoma. All the colleges in the state but one. 2 now with this Christian college out here. I haven't been out there. I've been invited by Dr. Barrett to come out. Something happened when we made a definite date, and I was sent somewhere else. I'm an honorary member of about 45 different chambers of commerce.
Okay. Well, there's hardly a place you could go without someone knowing you.
I know somebody in Oklahoma well enough in 300 towns that I could go in there and borrow $1 if I wanted.
Let's see, what was it? Last week you were writing about I know the mention of food in there was sounded so good. I can't recall where you were, but you were someplace, and it was.
Well, I frequently do a paragraph or more about good food when I run into it.
And it, I got so hungry reading it. Just fine, good old-fashioned home-cooked food.
Yeah. The best food, though, is at home.
I find that also. Well, do you think that our conservation, since is adequate to preserve that beauty that you're so fond of and so many people are fond of? You think we've gone far enough, or will go far enough?
Soil conservation?
Soil and parks and lands for the public, in other words. Do you think we're going to be able to preserve those beauty spots that
Well,
you've seen,
the
written
government
about?
is going to destroy a lot of them if the government's money holds out in building dams and reservoirs. This Mountain Fork River that I mentioned, there's one dam under construction there now, will be ready for use in maybe 2 years. Now a second dam is projected there upstream from it, within 5 miles of where the water will quit backing up from the first dam, and that will close the rest of the river. As far as native natural beauty is concerned. It just leaves 5 miles of the river itself between the two reservoirs. And it's the prettiest river in the state. It's just like the Creator made it. And man is destroying that beauty. But who am I to say that the U.S. engineers don't know what they're doing? I'm not an engineer, a water engineer at all. So I assume they must be needed, or they wouldn't spend $50, $60 million or more there building another one.
Well, it's nice to go see those things, those items. It's too bad we don't have some that are, although closer in. However, this new Draper Lake is going to be a beautiful lake out here.
Yes, it's going to be attractive. Doesn't have enough trees. But you have to go east of here to find trees. Nice big oaks and gums and pine. Some poplar, some ash, hackberry, hickory, walnut.
Oh, I hope you get to your book shortly.
I'd like to. I'd enjoy doing that, but I can't sit down and do it 1,000 words at a time. I want to make a project out of it, and
You're going to have to devote your...
sit down to the typewriter and start working 8 hours a day on it for 3 months, and I can get the job done. I can't do that though, and work for these papers too.
Well, R.G., thank you for allowing us into the smoking room.
Well, I hope I've given you something of what you had in mind or wanted.
Yes, we just...
Both of us may think of a lot more.
Probably will later. That's always the way. It's human nature, I guess. But to have this portion of your reflections and your thoughts on the state in particular, to add to the library,